Hello, everybody. So, got a few things to go over today. Back to example stuff. We're looking at elements and HTML elements and CSS properties. So, yeah, really the to-do list on my notes is only like that long. I just have 2 items on here, but it'll take all day. Or those 2 items. The first item will take up to the break, and the second item is for after the break. We're going to look at tables and lists. List will go very quickly because you may have noticed by now that our textbook author really likes lists. They use lists for all sorts of stuff. When I was taking an equivalent class to this, the textbook we used didn't even mention lists. They didn't ordered list and unordered list. Didn't even make the cut to make it in the textbook that I used in a similar class to this. But the author of our book apparently really likes them. Although they admitted kind of an important one, so most of the coverage on list is a quick pass on things you've probably seen in the textbook because the textbook author really loves list. And then the one that's omitted because you probably want to put lists that you can collapse, the collapsible list into your pages somewhere. Those are really useful. And we want to look at tables. Because that's an important thing because, well, whenever we have just a collection of data that needs shown as a table, there's an expectation of our end users of how that should look. And then after the break, we'll look at forms, which is the input elements, HTML elements that take input. And obviously, we don't have write access on web pages because that would be a major security risk if we could transmit something across the internet and start making changes on somebody's computer. So without write access, we can't really process our forms. Some stuff can be done in JavaScript, and when we look at JavaScript in 2 weeks, I think, do a quick intro to JavaScript in 2 weeks, we'll use some HTML form elements. But normally but that's for dynamic processing, and we can't save any of the values put in there. So normally, what the values entered into a form get transmitted to a server, and server-side scripting is a different class. And that one will also be fairly important for software development in general. Because modern software development is mostly done using frameworks. And with frameworks, we build an application once and then just show it in different things. So we make it look like a web app, or we make it look like a desktop app, or we write one application and then make it look like a mobile app or a desktop, however we want to display it in a particular situation, but it's the same code on the inside. And most people choose to do a web application first and then display it the other way versus making an Android app first and then displaying that as a desktop or on iOS or in a website. Most people start with the web application. So the form elements will be very important there when you get to the 200 level language specific course. You should be introduced to frameworks. And if you're in the SDEV program before you graduate, you'll have to take SDEV 257, which is hybrid apps, the class that actually focuses on the final version, the final step of showing that same application in different settings. And it definitely uses React Native, so that course is focused towards building a web application and then just showing it on a phone if we want a mobile app, or kind of changing the style around a little. So the form elements will be more useful moving forward. Right now we can put them on the page and style them. So we'll look at that, and that way when you get to your 200 level class, like maybe you're taking 220 with Python, and you start doing stuff in the Django framework, you know how to get input on your web application. For us today, we're just going to put them on there and style it. First off, a quick note about tables. Everybody know what I'm talking about with a table? Big grid of rows and columns. So rows and columns and the standard way to organize data basically. The picture's probably not showing up very well on there. Looking across the room, I can barely see it at all. Like I should.
For me, it just shows up as my name. Your picture's like really small.
Oh, if you go to the view in the upper right corner, you should be able to click speaker view, and that'll make mine big.
It's already checked.
Double click on my profile. That should pin it big. Yeah, because I'll write a couple things on the board, so I'll make sure you can see it. Did that work, Marcus?
No, it's.
Yeah, if you go to speaker view and then double click on it, it should pin that particular one, make it large. You might have to try around different settings.
Oh, okay, I got it. I just went ahead and hid non-video participants.
Oh, okay, yeah, that works too. There's almost always more than one way to do things, so I guess as you all progress down your software development pathways, remember to make multiple ways to do everything. That way, when users aren't sure how to, they'll find one of them. So everybody know what I'm talking about with tables? Nice organized way we look at data when we want to look at raw data itself. Organized into rows and columns, usually well labeled, but they don't necessarily have to be well labeled. And typically formatting that makes it easier to read. So a standard one is like the labels up at the top. We'll have some background color different than all the cells. And then we maybe alternate the coloring in the rows. Every row is a different color and makes it easier to find things in there. I think everybody's well familiar with tables. They're pretty standard in our story. First off, the big note, the reason I'm talking instead of just opening up a text editor and starting to type up stuff about tables is as you do different research and stuff, you may see warnings about tables and reference materials on HTML for HTML. And to clarify, these refer to the entire page layout. Remember last week we were looking at layouts and we'd set things in columns, maybe have our header go all the way across the page, and we'd do several columns, then leave a bunch of white space before we get to the footer down at the bottom, copyright information, laying things out that way. One point early in HTML, people started using tables for that, and they would do the whole page using tables to create the layouts, which wasn't the best way to do that. And then search engines were invented, or I guess search engines were around for a while, but search engines migrated from local networks to the internet. And at that point, things changed drastically, and that's what the warnings are about. Search engines do not read the data in a table. So if you try to use the table elements like we're getting ready to look at for the layout on the whole page, a search engine will not read what's on that page.
Isn't that what the two styles we briefly talked about at the end of last week based around? So we'll look in.
Oh, those aren't tables. So it is an element called table. Yeah.
It's not. So
we're getting ready to create a table element. So preview, and there's some other stuff we want to put in the opening one. So an actual HTML table element. And inside of that, we get table row, TR for table row, /tr, and then we have TD for table data or just one cell. I'll put that in there, one cell /TD. So like, yeah, use grid and flex if you want it to look like a table. If you want it to look like a table, your page to look like a table, use grid.
The grid and flex just.
And it's just gonna look like it. Yeah, these are for like when you read a bunch of stuff out of the database and spit that out so people can see it in the form it's stored in the database in just the raw data format. And since raw data sets can get very, very large and bog down search bots, they assume that if you have a table element, that's raw data, so they will not read those unless somebody explicitly puts in the search SQL. Yeah, actually, you have to start using wildcard characters and SQL keywords in order to make a search engine read the data in a table, and most people don't do that. Unless somebody is already a data analyst, they probably don't even know that you can't do that.
I certainly did not know that you could just go into Google and use those commands or whatever.
Yes, the asterisk, yeah. You probably won't want to use asterisks, the wildcard selector that's filling any spots, but a question mark is still filling one single spot. If you don't know what letter goes into something and you're looking for something close to it, it could be a bit, well, if you use the wildcard in Google, you get a little bit of everything. But then certain keywords from SQL to and question marks and ampersands and asterisks, these and in order not working search things, but really it's just data analysts that do that, and they would probably search for a table and then do that part themselves separately. But that's what those warnings are about. So when you see warnings that say don't use tables, that means don't use tables for the entire page. Use tables for your data set. Because it will also help with search results, because if raw data is always put in a table, even if the search engine is not reading that data, the bots in the background that prepare the search results ahead of time do read the data. The ones that take 72 to 96 hours to go through your page, as opposed to a couple of milliseconds. Those do read through it. So if the data is all in a table element like it should be, that will help your search engine results. Because then the bots will summarize it. That's not even summarize it. They'll make notes about it. But like, there's a table full of data. This data set might be needed. Yeah, use tables for table-like things, which is to present and organize data. I was already talking about why, so just don't use the whole thing. Okay. That's
Have other information that tells what the table is and what's in it, so the other bots can figure out what the heck's going on, basically.
Yes. And it doesn't do it. I wouldn't want to call it a summary, because like if we did a table of student data, that's what the thorough bots would tell the quick bots that reply to search queries. It would say there's a table of student data. It wouldn't tell it anything about that. It wouldn't tell it like from what school or what year or anything like that. It would just note that there's a table of student data on the page. Okay, so we have two ways to do this. We can use the traditional table element, or their CSS table properties. Let's look at both of them real quick. Won't take very long. Share screen. And this time, instead of using the template, I'm going to type everything out. I probably started using the template sooner than I should have. But everybody remember how to get the template in your text editor, you know. If not, I'm going to type it out this time. I probably jumped the gun on those templates a couple weeks ago. So the first thing we need is our doc type declaration. Oops, I need to make sure cap lock's not on. And it's just the word HTML, tells it it's HTML5. And if we open any sort of document, I don't know what we're going to have on this computer right now. I don't think I have anything. This computer is pretty much only used for lectures. Oh, I don't have any PDF screenshot. So if I was to try to open this JPEG with a text editor, Well, it's a ping. So if I open this ping, notice the very first thing in the file is it says it's a ping. I was expecting there to be at least one PDF on here, but apparently not, which is the same thing. The very first line in your file says what to open it with. And that or says what type of file it is. And that's not something that will cause a crash, but that is something that has been standard in software development for decades. So when you go and make software that has your own special file type, the file type that opens only with your software, remember to put that doc type declaration in there so that a computer can figure out what to do with it.
That's the part of the computer looks at when you just click on an icon and then it goes, okay, I'll open this specific application to blow that thing up.
Yes. So that's where it's not it won't cause an error, but it's been convention for decades. So that's what operating systems look for first, even beyond the file. Then they look at the file extension, but not all files have file extensions, or some files only have file extensions and don't have any name. HT access for one. .git for one. They start with a dot. Any file, Mac has a lot of them. If you're on a Mac, you're probably used to seeing them. Any of them that start with a dot, those are files that only have an extension and not a name.
So that's why sometimes you can get away with, like, when you're trying to save a picture, you can change it to like a .jpeg or .png. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's like, what in the hell did you just do?
Yes, because they are very different. I like to talk about it in class. It's never covered anywhere in the internal ones. A JPEG is a discrete cosine transform. So it's stored as colors are stored as a wave. Numerical data is inside a wave. It looks like a sound wave if you open it in the right way, but it doesn't relate to the light wave. That's just a mathematical format for doing it. Whereas pings are stored in layers, and then they're valued because the NG stands for network graphics, so they're designed to be transmitted. So we could drop any layers or any aspects. Things are either critical or ancillary immediately in those. So that's a sidetrack. I like to cover it in the Informatics 109 class. That's the only place I've been able to make it fit, and it doesn't show up anywhere. Graphic designers don't even study the difference between them, but some of us are really fascinated by computer graphics. Where are we at? We're in fifth week. That sounds like a good name. Fifth week be our example. I'm going to call this table.html, and I'll just put everything in this form. So we won't have an index page in this week. Then we need our elements. So an HTML element, opening and closing tags, and we'll put some stuff in between them. In between them, we have to have a head and a body section. The head will have metadata, which we're going to talk about maybe next Wednesday, but probably the following Monday. Depends on what the time looks like next Wednesday, but we might get to it next Wednesday. Metadata, a bunch of stuff like that. The big one we'll need is the link to the style sheet. Oh yeah, the title. I'm just going to do the link to the style sheet right now. Where is it at? I'll call this table.css. Seems like a relevant name for it. The relevance is it's a style sheet, and the MIME type is Unicode holding CSS data. We should probably have a couple more things in the head, but for clarity in the example, I'm going to leave that out. Y'all have probably seen them from the templates, all the metadata. What character set are we using? This weird thing because iPhones won't use the entire width of the page. So we have to explicitly put the instruction somewhere to be like, the viewport is the entire width of the viewport. Otherwise, iPhones will decide that we only need 2 or 3 pixels wide for a web page. And been going on for decades, so Apple doesn't really seem concerned with fixing it. That's what that viewport display equals width property is. that's in the templates. We'll talk about those in a couple weeks. Okay, so now we need some stuff for this. What do I have in my example that I prepared? Put some random words at the top, then a traditional table.
Is there any particular reason why the iPhone does that, or is it just something it just did that and nobody bothered to fix it?
Yeah, iPhones have done that for a while. Other computers used to do that. If they wouldn't, other computers would assume that we needed more than 3 or 4 pixels for a web page, but they might only cover half the page. It's that thing I put in the CSS a few times. I always like to put HTML min width 100% or min height is 100% to say always take up the full height. So it's the instruction to do that, but the computers, the operating system sometimes decide the width. And yeah, I guess the fix is put metadata in the HTML. They called it fixed, and nobody ever went back and did anything else with it.
Good enough.
Yeah, Microsoft and Linux fixed it, so that those systems don't do it. And then Chromebook is a Linux system. Chromebook is a Linux network, but that's a different class. So what do we want to put here? I have a calculator. Oh, something we already shown. So, excuse me. I'm going to put a couple things. I'll put a main element here, and then in the first main element, we'll do a traditional HTML table, and then the second one we'll do a CSS table. Well, it's already on the board. Obviously, there's a table element in the table. And inside of the table, we have table row. I'll put a comment here because we had just a reminder about what comments are. A table row. Do not rely on comments being like comments in your other languages. There was a time when, before HTML was standardized with HTML5, and all the people that made browsers just did their own thing. So sometimes we would use comments to do 2 different versions of the page. Because back in the day, for those people who remember the names, we'd have to do a Netscape version and an AOL version, which read different HTML. So we would comment one of them out. Oh, and an Internet Explorer version, because it was different back then too. And we'd comment out things that would cause some of them to crash. But as a result of that, browsers still read the commented out elements. If you put an element inside of an HTML element inside of a comment, your browser will still read it and show it. So we have a table row, and then we have table data, which is a cell. Table data, a single cell. Which hopefully that comment's not going to show. There's no HTML elements inside of it, but I'm going to do like name, age, and town. So like that's a common thing I do. So name, I'll end that, and normally the table, the TD element, I put right in order because that's the small one. So name, age, and town, which actually I guess I could do that. So that's, for those who haven't seen me do that before, that is my standard classroom example. I'm gonna put it back in one row like I normally do, and I'll put the comment above it. That'll work. TD, and we have cells for name, age, and town, our row headers. Then we'll need a couple more rows just to make it. I'm just going to make up some names. So table row, and table data for, I don't know, Sally, who's 44 years old and lives in Salem. Then we need a couple more table rows. I think y'all see where this pattern's going. Right, I'll do a couple real quick and make a Chuck and an Alan. Those sound like good names. I don't know, maybe Alan's 24 and lives in New Albany. These are not real people. I'm just making this up right now. Well, somewhat right now. I use the same names every time, so it's not completely made up, but relatively made up. I made it up in class one day, and I've just kept using Sally, Chuck, and Alan for the example for years now. We don't have any CSS yet. We can go ahead and look at this. Oh, that is, we're going to look at those in just a second. So table headers would normally, there is a TH element that would have that's specified for the headers, but we don't, yeah. We'll look at that in a second. So the question in the chat room about using table headers. This is our bare minimum, and then table headers is a special type of table row. Same with table footers. I was going to come back and look at those. Change that first one was my plan. Fifth week, there we go. So here's our table page. You can see everything organizes nicely. With a table, we might want the lines between them. That is just a border element. Border equals 0 is the default, no border. And really it's a 0 or 1. Yeah, I'm gonna put a 1 in here. Reload that. That shows, you see that shows up on there. If I put like say a 15, make a much bigger number, we start to get it starts to give us space on the outer border. So 1 turns the borders on, and bigger numbers give us an outer border. And you might remember from the border property in CSS, light in the upper left and dark in the lower right is the outset sort of border. So that's what we have on the table by default. And like was put in the chat, we also have special type of special ways to mark the headers, which really we can TH, right? Yeah. Which at this point don't do anything, but it gives us a way to identify it. So that is much older than HTML5, but it's a lot like semantic tags. We can single out the header for a different sort of styling. It's also a T-foot. I'll just put one cell in here that says ampersand copy. Just to show that we can do jagged tables. Somewhat. Have column span attributes. Is that my example? Yes. So on this table data right here, I can say column span equals 3. We do count the one it would fall in on normally. We have 3 columns in our table, so we need to span 3 columns. Hopefully nothing seems surprising there. But we can do jagged tables. You saw at first that it doesn't mind having some rows shorter than others. or that first column was obviously longer than the others. So Jenga tables are allowed, set all that stuff up. And then for the header, really the T head and T foot are sort of singled out on our style sheet. Which I had over here. Didn't I? Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, I didn't put in my example from prepping. So we need our style sheet now to start doing some things with this, which is really sort of an experimentation. So I'm going to copy the name of what I said the style sheet would be, create a new folder, and save it with that name. So just a quick copy and paste. That way, if there's a typo in that name, I don't have to worry about it, because the computer doesn't care how it's spelled as long as it's spelled the same way every time. So obviously we have a table element. Let me come down a couple spaces. We'll want to put some properties on. Then we have T head. Might want to single out our T row things in some way. Our table data and the T foot. All those just default ones that are there. Let me put something here. So like we put a border on here. Say 8 pixels. Outset, because we saw by default it wants to give it an outset border. And some color. Sky blue. Maybe that'll show. Maybe deep sky blue. I'll choose deep sky blue. Sky blue might be a little bit light. Notice how that got all of our borders, not just the outside one. So properties, all the table cell properties get inherited from table. Hopefully at this point, this stuff's not necessarily surprising. Singling out the T head is so we can put a different background than the rest of everything, right? Background color, maybe lime green with a foreground color of charcoal gray, not a color? Apparently not. Something gray, dark gray. So all zeros is black and all F's is white. So something closer to zeros. So like 43, 43, 43 should be a dark gray. That's darker gray than I was expecting, or maybe it just looks that way. But we can single out that row, maybe put the same thing on the footer. You know, there's nothing special about doing that twice. That's why we leave lots of lag time at the end to play around with those things. So apply different properties, see what they do. Hopefully none of them are very surprising. Tables are the HTML table element is much older than CSS. So it was there and in common use when CSS was created. I'm going to copy a couple more of the rows here. You should probably want to do something like this. What are some other names? Mary, who's 84 and lives in maybe Marysville. Lewis, who's 19, lives in Louisville. Still making up names. Need one more.
You put 19 in the.
Oh, thank you. Corey, who's also 24 and lives in Cortland. So a bunch of random, just some random data, but this is to look at something we've seen before because it shows up incredibly useful on tape, becomes incredibly useful on tables. Come back over that style sheet, or, well, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 rows, and it's already kind of hard to read. Things start to blend together already, right? That's where that nth child pseudo element is. So we could do table row, and maybe we just want the nth child, and maybe say the even ones. Oops. Even ones get a background color of I don't know, sky blue, and the nth child, the odd table rows will get a background color of steel blue. Just kind of made that up. That's what happened to table head and table row though. Or table head, I guess we didn't do anything with footer. Those do count as table rows. So that's a situation where order probably matters, right? Because it applied this rule and then continued on down the script, and well, row 1 is you'll notice it got off too. Those first two should not, they can't both be even and both be odd in order like that, right? So it doesn't actually count that. I believe it counted it as row 0.
Does it count the head?
But then it started, so it counts as a table row, but then it started counting again. So notice
like it counts all the headers as their
Yes.
own group, all the footers as their own group, and all the regular rows as their own group.
Ex-
But it applies to all of them.
Exactly.
So the one footer row is footer row 1. And one header row is header row 1 in case you have like multiple header rows.
Exactly. When it counted, it went 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Be aware of that, but that's an easy fix. That's an order issue. So all we need to do is move our header, hit Control X, and bring that down after those rules. I often try to do, I try to stay close to the order things are in the HTML file. This is one place where it has to kind of break away from that, because it's pretty common to change the row coloring in a table. Uh-oh. Why is it not changing? Oops. I'm in inspector. And when you hit things like this, probably should have went in this way first time. That's what the inspector is for. So if we expand that, find our table header. So it looks like it applies to the table head properties. This is saying that that's applied. And then the table head.
You need to clear the cache.
Because it's applying. So notice how the rules are still applied. The order issue is a little deeper here. Because it counts as a table row, but notice the order that it's selecting, it gets everything from table, inherits that, then table head, then this, and it doesn't, our pseudo elements aren't listed on here. Those are done afterwards, because remember, some of those are like covered or active. Right? They depend on where our mouse is on the page and where we're clicking. So those are done after the fact, which means those are getting applied.
It doesn't care where it shows on the sheet, it's just doing it afterwards.
Yes. So that one, definitely watch out for. there's a couple workarounds to fix. I think I did this before and it worked pretty well. Let's put an ID on here. Whoops. ID equals T head. And change this to an ID instead of a element selector. Oh, it's still wanting to show that nth child. So
Did you update the one on the CSS to have the new ID? Okay.
yes. Yes, I was just showing the problem. So really that needs to go the other way. We need to give the rows we want to change colors an ID. I like to show errors. In textbooks and stuff, we always see that finished polished product and don't see how they got to that product. And y'all have probably noticed that's not how writing code goes for us. There's a lot of back and forth, and sometimes it's like, what just happened here?
Oh God, what the hell did I just do?
And yeah, y'all know the process here, right? We look at what's going on, use what tools we have to dig through, analyze the source of the problem, and then start trying things that we think will fix it. Always fix one problem at a time, because remember, problems might be connected. The first problem could be causing the second problem, and if you try to adjust both things at the same time, you'll end up messing stuff up. So
Welcome to spaghetti code.
yes, the general process: analyze the problem, figure out why it's happening, and then try to fix that. Then start trying things that you think will fix it. We make ID equals TR, because that'll be a really easy one to do, and then copy that into all of them.
Would it be possible, instead of putting them as each individual TR element, would it be possible to surround them in an element and use that?
Yes, that would probably
break the table, or?
that would probably work as well. The one thing to remember is we're looking at an example of just some random data typed directly in here. Normally, we're not going to know what the data is when we put the web page together. As soon as somebody opens the web page, the database is going to get queried, and then that's going to get loaded in, and all this stuff will be typed dynamically.
Okay.
So we'll have the table element on here, and then say if you're a Python programmer and using Django, you would put you would set it up as your template, and then right here in your template you would say table data, and then you would send table data as a key in the dictionary and have all the TR rows. Or
these tables are not like a pre-constructed, this is what will always be here. This is literally a database query item, essentially.
Yeah, or you might do something like this, TR.
So honestly, at first I was envisioning, like, because you see tables that are static on websites at times. So I was kind of thinking that.
Oh yes, if we're just typing it in, that would probably work.
But you can also use this to live query your own servers of wherever the hell this is.
I forgot some characters there. I forgot percent signs. So really,
whenever somebody comes,
you'd probably have a Python script typing the code, and then you'd have this for the results of a SQL query to fill out a table. Everybody seen a for loop before? For every element in an array that Python sends us, just throw that element in between the table data. So it's going to look something like that. So these are dynamic. So looking for solutions, you want to make sure you find a solution that will work dynamically, especially for tables. Okay, what's going on here now? Oh, I didn't change CSS, did I? Right now we can change the CSS. So anything with that ID is the only ones that get that. What happened? Now I came to the table head seems to have disappeared. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Change that back to what it originally was before that. First failed attempt to fix it. That's a little bit easier of a table to read, probably when it says some sizing and bold. We haven't talked about bold yet, have we? Let's put bold in that table header. Weight. And you all are probably used to things like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, where we have one button that says bold, so things are either bold or not bold, right? Weight of an element or weight of a character starts at 100, goes up to 900. Can I say that? Oh, font weight, sorry. Lots of things that we could apply weight to. So font weight goes from 100 to 900, so we have way more than one option. To narrow it down a little bit, TSS has 3 words. So we can either say bold, bolder, or boldest. Oh, boldest. Wait, why did that spell it? Bolder. Okay, I must have spelled boldest wrong, but we have the 3 words we can work with. But really, it's a number between 100 and 900. So you would choose which value you want in there. Let's say 787. That looks like it's about the range of bolder. Versus 213. I don't even see a difference between 213 and the regular font. So it's a very sensitive thing. So you probably want to make big jumps in those numbers. I'll do like 787 and add a comment here. A number between bold is a number between 100 and 900, or bold, bolder, and boldest. Spelled correctly. I don't think that's the right spelling of boldest because it didn't work when I just typed it in there. Check the spelling on the S, the third one. But I might have just made a random typo. I guess we could italicize some stuff too.
I'm not saying that's misspelled. Like my spell checker's not going off.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I typed I might have made a typo or something. But normally you would want to use the user number.
It's bold, bolder, boldest. So it was the word.
Yeah, yes. Although I almost never use the words unless they've been removed. I have not looked them up in probably 10 years. Bold and bolder definitely works. I'm pretty sure I made a typo on the third one. Oh, italics. Let's put something in the copyright so we can do the italicizing. Copyright 2024 for an in-class example. And then this one we can identify uniquely by the descendant selector. So the T foot element has a table data element in it. So a space between them. And for that, font style as italic. Just because we haven't seen these. Font decoration. Is it font decoration? Is underlined? Can't remember the word, but Google knows what it is, right? Underline in CSS, should be able to find it. Y'all know this process too, right? Text decoration, so not font decoration. So font, yeah, these are odd, right? Font weight for bold, font style for italic,
This is what we get for stuff made by who knows how many people over who knows how many
decoration. Yes,
years. This is the issue of an unknown number of users doing an unknown number of updates over an unknown number of years.
yes. Before the standardizations, these are all properties from before standardization, and that's pretty common because those are different things, right? Underlining is not an alternative to bold. Italic isn't italicizing something isn't different than or isn't just an alternative to being bold. They're separate things altogether. Yeah, and y'all can start playing around with properties. That's all the unpredicted. That's all the. They're not unpredictable, but they're not completely predictable, not immediately predictable points. The rest of them, it's going to follow any CSS properties you have. Start playing around with it. Right, it's an active subject we learn by doing. Let's do another one here. Main. I'm gonna give this one an ID. I'm gonna give it a class. Class equals table. Close that up. And we also have the ability to just style some of our elements this way. What can we put in here? Let's do sections. And that'll be our table row. So I'll give it a class equals row. And inside of that, maybe an article. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I'll just do a paragraph here. I was going to go an extra one, but we don't really have. Y'all will see what to do after this. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. So name in the paragraph, age, paragraph, town. We'll put the same, basically make the same thing. Oh, this should probably be a header. Hold on. My header. And then I'll call the next one my row. Sorry. Let's do another section with the class equal to my row. And then we can put some data in here. What do we have? Sally is, I don't know, whatever age I typed in earlier, or some new age, and lives in Salem. That'll be enough to start with. So I guess the rest of it's going to be copy and paste and fill out the data. To save time, I'm just going to copy and paste and make a note here. Should probably change this data. Paste, 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 but that'll give us a rather terrible data set, but a data set, right? So by default, we get that block style. Everything takes up the entire width of the page, the line break, and then we get the next step. So this one's all done in CSS. So we have a class, I should probably call that my table. That way it's a little bit clearer in the example than just putting a dot before it. So we come over here, we have a class name my table, and we can use the display property to set it as a table. We've seen the display property before. Nothing happened yet though, because it doesn't know. We need more information than just saying we have a table, right? That first one we needed said we had a table, but then we had to follow it up by saying we have table rows and then table cells. So we need to specify what the table row and table cell is. Along with the header and footer, probably. So on the my row, set our display table dash row. Oh, look again. So spacing changed, still doesn't quite look right. So we need those paragraph elements in there. And you probably wouldn't normally do that with a paragraph element. I just chose a paragraph element because that typically has a line break. And sometimes you might go to something with a line break, like a list item, and didn't need to get rid of it. So in the my table element, there should be some my row elements, and then those will have a paragraph, and then that one can display as a table cell. Oh, forgot the header row. Or yeah, we can add it here. My row and my header. There we go. So you can see it quickly went up there, and then everything else has to be with CSS. We cannot have jagged tables here. Everybody know what I mean when I say jagged tables? This one's a jagged table. See how most of our rows have
where one fills go.
at least one of our rows has a different number of cells than the others, so it's not going to be perfectly square. The CSS tables will not allow that. I wouldn't know right on the page, maybe afterwards. Let's put a paragraph down here. It says, note, no jagged tables in CSS display property. Then we can do stuff that you would probably expect, like borders. Border, 9 pixels, outset. There's sky blue. I use sky blue. For the table cells, we probably also want a border. Border, double, 4 pixels, and sky blue. That way it matches. And I think y'all can take it from there. This is just raw CSS, so there's shouldn't be any surprises on this one. And then my header, if we can give multiple class names, so that first one is a row and a header, which is advantageous over the traditional head element, because this one took some workarounds to get away from those pseudo element selectors we wanted. But here, if we use multiple class, since we'll already have multiple class names, we can get more refined with it. And I don't know, background color, that looks like lime. I think I put a foreground color in the previous one, but then let's skip that for now. Font weight of 850. Sounds good. Starting to look more like those others. Cells would be a bit of a problem here. Let's see what happens if we just try to do the my row. My row, the nth child, and we'll say the even ones come in I think the even ones were sky blue, right? Background color of sky blue. And copy that. And the other ones, I think I said steel blue. So about a lot of copy and paste. When we reload it. That time we didn't we didn't have to come back and figure out a fancy trick. The even one didn't show up. Did I spell something wrong? I see steel blue on there. I see the dark blue, but not the light blue. Oh, they can't both be even. Make this one odd. Oh, it did it again. Notice how we get changes will start happening in weird places. Even we do that, it works. Trying to change this to the odd ones. And we're back into that selection issue. So it looked like it worked, but then it didn't. So sort of the same issue. We'll probably need a third class name to identify which ones are like that, or we could just instead of doing multiple classes, we could just put that in here. Display as table row. Whoops. Because that's really the only thing we were using that other class name for. We just haven't looked at multiple class names many times, but in that case, we can do an easier fix. Oh, but now those cells are off. So, yeah, I don't know if it's really an easier fix or not. Let me undo that. Or here, undo that, put that back in. And yeah, you'll just want to find a solution. We already saw one solution come up, so maybe look into a couple solutions. All in all, that table probably looks better with the white, so alternating white cells, but I'll leave that for you. Because trial and error, there are lots of ways to fix it. We saw one way on the first try, so it seems logical that the same way would fix it, but you see, we have multiple ways to get the same results with one big difference. You remember that note from talking at the beginning? You will see warnings about not using tables for layouts, because that's what we did back in the mid 1990s, late 1990s, that first .com boom. Pretty sure most of y'all are way too young to remember that. I was a teenager at the time, so I remember it quite vividly when websites first started showing up with Windows 95, and suddenly everybody had the internet at home. It was really, really, really slow back then, but we would use tables to do layouts, and tables have a purpose, and it's not for a layout. So when search engines came along, reading data, like the actual purpose of what a table should be, will be problematic for search engines. So search engines don't look at the table data, but our table elements, this one down here, our second table, the one with CSS, those are not table elements. Those are table style rules. So a search engine will read those tables. It's the big advantage of those. So
even if it is that auto generate fill in the
yes, because it's yeah, the search engine is explicitly coded to ignore table things. But if you want it to look like a table, but you want to make sure the search engine reads it,
what will it like? Say you do that, the generated one with where it looks like queries and stuff to poop out from the database. Will it just see that you're looking at a database, or will it somehow?
it only sees the results.
It will see the search bot will see the results when it looks at it.
Yes. Once it leaves the server, for any reason, whether it's going to a search bot or the end user,
It pulls
those have
it.
already been filled in.
Okay.
that template's already been filled in, I want to leave the server. So when it gets to the end user, if you were to like right click and view page source, you would not see, it would look exactly like this.
You wouldn't see the query
You wouldn't see the query.
shenanigans.
You cannot see server side code from the client side.
That is effectively the server side code. Basically,
It
it
runs-
never goes, oh, someone wants to look at my website. It runs that, fills it in, and then throws it.
Yes. Yes, so ultimately, what you're learning in this class, you'll write server side code that writes this code. Because it's written based off things in the database or maybe relevant to other stuff going on in the world at that particular time. So we write dynamic stuff and we dynamically put this together on a server, but the server transmits this. So once it leaves the server, there's no way to get in there and see the code that's running unless you have access to log into that server and read the file yourself. Any questions about tables? Should be fairly straightforward. I want to do the list before a break, but list might take 15 minutes, so probably a good time for a break. We should do a break first. Because while our textbook author loves lists, he left off one that you probably want to use, which when this book was in first edition, that it was long before it existed. It was only created in like 2016, I think. But that was at least 3 versions of our textbook ago. They could have added it by now, especially as much as they like lists. But let's take a break first. 10 minutes sound good to everybody? Anybody? Any thoughts on that? I could really use a sip of coffee. So my laptop says 2:07. So let's get back to it at 2:17. See y'all in just a moment.